A little disclaimer, I'm not a historian, I'm a teacher of history. And another little disclaimer, I'm not an expert on Native Americans, but I did, with the meetings with the directors and coordinators and the principals, indicate that I thought it was important for everyone at least to know the basic story of what happened here in the 17th century and before. And therefore won the job. And it's really kind of interesting because one of the big problems with this topic is sources. See, so much of it happened before 1676, and the sources are a real difficulty because the Native Americans that were in this area didn't have a written language, and they would not have a written language until later in the 17th century, so that you have some oral tradition that's written down afterwards, and you have archaeological evidence, you have a ton of it going back quite a ways, for the Native Americans that lived in this particular area. Now, I'm not talking about what happened in Plymouth, or what happened in Indiana, or what happened out in Miami. I'm talking about what happened right here in the Winchester area, Greater Boston, within 128, shall we say. So there are archaeological remains that are in the area, including places where Native Americans lived. Quite a few tools have shown up over time. Quite a few tools showed up in this town over time, by the way, especially when it was an agricultural community. They were always churning up Indian polished stone and flake, various cutting instruments. I'm looking at Clarence because this is one of his areas. And there were remains as far as food, that sources for the Native Americans in this area. But most accounts are going to be written by Europeans. And the Europeans, they're the most prevalent accounts that we have for the 17th century. And we have to remember when we talk about it, that while the story seems to be consistent, the point of view the perspective is clearly different. And I left a book on that table over there. Thank you. And I just want to read two little passages from Winchester's only local history. It was written in the 30s, by the way, as part of a federal writers project under the New Deal, just to get a little bit more history in there. But this author has a particular point of view, and let me read it to you. A little selection here. He's describing the local Indians. They were all of the Algonquin race, a people at once less intelligent and less warlike than some other redskins, the Iroquois, for example, and far less advanced than their distant cousins who lived in Mexico or in our own Southwest. One other. And he also expresses a little bit further on what almost all of the 17th century writers expressed. It was perhaps true that it was the good fortune of the colonists of Massachusetts Bay to have come upon the scene when the savage spirit of the Pawtuckets, he had the tribe wrong, was broken by their misfortunes, and when they were ready to welcome the newcomers as possible allies and protectors against foes of their own race. Both Cotton Mather and Sir Fernando Gorges did not hesitate to entertain the pious belief that it was by a special intervention of Providence that so many savages were cleared out of the way to make room for God's people. So, we have a problem with sources, all right? But the local story comes through loud and clear from the various accounts that we have. And so here's the story as I see it. By the way, well, I'll get into it in a minute. Let me just throw up. I want to put up. Literally throw up. Let me put up a moment. Oh. Dave, I thought for a moment, concern had happened. Dave asked me this morning if we had an extra bulb. I said, are you kidding?
It's an art story, it's a nightmare.
Every teacher's nightmare. She doesn't go on. Let me put up here a little timeline just to give you some basic information. I brought it back 10,000 years. Okay, so 10,000 years ago is really the first time that you have Native Americans here in this area. That's a long time ago. And they were Paleo-Indians. They were old. Paleo, Paleolithic. As the ice receded, the people came into this area and settled, and they were big game hunters. I mean, big game hunters. And over a period of time, you move from the Paleo-Indian, again, these are, of course, European terms. You move into the Archaic Indians, and at that time period, the ice has receded, the big game has disappeared, and these people become, in this area, become small game hunters, deer, raccoons, and beaver, and other smaller game, and they become food gatherers. And then we enter the period which is really our period of interest. And notice we're 3,000 years ago. And we're back there. And you enter the woodland period, and the Indians that lived in this area that will make contact with the Europeans are eastern woodland Indians. And in this period between 3,000 and 500 years ago, they went from basket weaving to stone pottery, to clay-fired pottery, which evidently was a major change in their culture, and even to the adoption of the bow and arrow. But these people were farmers, and they grew beans, they grew corn, they grew squash, they grew tobacco in this area. And they were also slash and burn agriculturalists. They, that's a term. You would cut the tree in such a way that you couldn't cut it down, but you would cut it, you would burn the brush around it, thereby opening up the canopy so that they could grow crops. But that also meant that they had to move fairly frequently. They would summer near the coast and live on fish and shellfish, and that's, they find mounds of shellfish in various areas along Massachusetts Bay where they would live in the summertime. And in the fall and winter time, they would move back into the interior, for example, into this area here. And these Native Americans, they lived in wigwams. They're like Quonset huts made out of bark and with a wooden frame. And they also some of them lived in longhouses, multiple family dwellings. Okay. 500 years ago, they may have had their first contact with Europeans. We don't know. John Cabot, an Italian, sailing for the King of England, Cabato, sails here. And certainly went along the coast. Now, did he have contact with the Native Americans in this area? Who knows? But we do know that in 1614 they definitely had their first contact, and they met John Smith. We know that because John Smith wrote a lot about his life. I mean, John Smith, John Smith, who is saved by Pocahontas and that whole myth in Virginia. He sailed up along the coast in a small open boat and explored all up through this area. He's the one who names a lot of the areas in Massachusetts Bay. But he definitely made first contact with the Native Americans in this area. And I want you to just note, before I return to Winchester's story, the estimated population, this is done by the white people, for the Indians in the Mass Bay area is roughly 3,000 people in 1614, in that time period. It's before Plymouth. between 1614 and 1633, there were at least 3 major plagues and a war. The war did not involve whites. In 1620, the Pilgrims arrived, and the estimated population, not on the Cape, but in this area, is 800. So we can see that, you can see why perhaps the Pilgrims thought it was God's providence. In 1630, when the Puritans arrived, they're the people who settled the Boston area, the estimated population is down to about 500. Okay? Beyond 1800, there are no known survivors. We're talking about the tribe that lived here. So let me put that tribe into context with other tribes as we continue our story. This is the Northeastern Woodland Tribes by language grouping. And you'll notice that most of the tribes in the Eastern Woodland area are of the Algonquin language family. And then there are some that are of the Iroquoian family and some of the Samoan family. Now, this is our tribe right here, the Massachusetts. The state's named after them. They lived here. They were an Algonquin-speaking family. Okay?
We're going to change the name of the state too?
They were very closely related linguistically and culturally to the Wampanoags, who are the tribe that met the Pilgrims down in Plymouth, and to the tribes that are down in, if I can think of them, the Narragansett, down into Rhode Island, and I try to see if the Nauset is up there. They were also closely related to the Nauset Indians that were down onto the Cape area. Now, when I say closely related, their culture was very similar and their language was very similar. It's kind of just, this has been kind of described as though this, the Algonquin family is sort of like the Romance languages. There's French, Italian, and Spanish. But some of them were closer than others. So there is a close relationship with those Indians that were really closest to them, physically close. Okay. Now, the Indians that lived in Winchester, they were thought to be grouped in about 20 villages when they're first found, running from up on the North Shore, the Lynn area, down around to almost a native. And they were divided into categories by leadership. And the leader in this area was a man by the name of Nanepashemet. And Nanepashemet is Squaw Sachem's husband. Okay. Just before the first white penetration into this area, okay, into Winchester, which will not take place until 1620, a little after 1620. Just before that penetration into this area, there was a major conflict between the Massachusetts tribe and some tribes from the north. And this conflict, they think they may have been the Abenaki, but there's no hard evidence of that coming down from New Hampshire and Maine. But what we do know is, combined with the plagues that were sweeping through this area, after 1614, there was a lot of incidental contact with Europeans who were coming up and down the coast trading with the various tribes, even before settlement took place. And they were trading various items of metal cooking pots, etc., for furs in particular. And the Indian was unprepared for the white man's diseases, especially smallpox and many of the childhood diseases that for the European were not big killers, but for the Native American, they were going to be devastating. Measles and chickenpox were going to be serious plagues for the Indians in this area. Anyway, on top of the plagues, you have a war. And the Indians in this area will lose the war, and it's a serious loss. Nana Pashamet, the Sachem of this particular area, remember that Sachem means leader. Okay, that's not the name of the Indians, it's a title or within the tribe, and it's used by many of the tribes in this area. Nana Pashamet is killed, along with a number of his warriors. In fact, the first whites to come into this area to actually see the final fortification and area where the fighting took place, and they write about it. Unfortunately, no one has been able to pinpoint it. Winchester claims that it was up in the fells. Medford claims it was down off Grove Street, in an area on a knoll down there. But they, who knows, you know? They don't know, except that what they saw was the fact that the Native Americans in this area had been seriously defeated in a war, had lost a large number of people, had lost a large portion of their population due to disease, and the leader of the tribe was a woman, wife of Nana Pashamet. And Squaw Sachem has, at least the tribe in this area, Squaw Sachem has taken over. We don't know her name. Historically, we know the name of her first husband, we know the name of her second husband, we know the name of her 3 sons. We don't know her name. We only know her as Squaw Sachem. But she appears in all kinds of records, court records, deeds, and it's clear that the whites who arrived in this area dealt with her as the one in charge, and she was the leader. Okay, well, so sometime right after the Pilgrims get established in Plymouth, they penetrate this area. And they have been told that there is an Indian tribe living here and that their leader is a woman, and they are unable to locate her. And you have to remember, you have to change your image of the landscape. You have to remember that in the early 1600s, when the Europeans stepped off the boat, stumbled over the rock and walked up the beach, he walked into a forest, or she, into a forest that was almost impenetrable. And that forest of original growth extended everywhere. And here and there would be these cleared areas that the Native Americans had cleared for agriculture, but otherwise they might just as well have been in the middle of a jungle. And they penetrated somewhere on the Winchester-Woburn line, unable to find the tribe, they returned to Plymouth. Another group makes it out here from Merrimount, which was down in the Wollaston area. You have to remember, we got a quick little history lesson. The Pilgrims found Plymouth. They're separatists. They are the kind of the radical wing of the English Protestant church at that time. The Puritans found Massachusetts Bay. They are not separatists, yeah, but they're Puritans, and they are looking to purify the English church. A third group landed in the Wollaston area, and they were members of the established Church of England. Okay? They also move out into this area and make contact with the Indians. But, as you may or may not know the story, the Pilgrims and the Puritans would unite on a single issue, and they will boot out the people in the Wollaston area. Well, you know. Anyway. Didn't ask me why. Anyway, the people in Boston and Charlestown, the Puritans, they are very well organized when they come here. They come in large numbers. They come very well established. They found Salem. They moved down to Charlestown move across to Boston. They push into this area here, and they make contact with the Indians in this area. And they will deal with Squaw Sachem. And they will make contact even before they settle in this area. Okay. So what? Remember that the tribe is much decimated by this point. And the white man who arrives here wants to acquire the land. So they're going to deal with the Indians in this area. And they deal with Squaw Sachem. And there are some problems. Squaw Sachem gives some of her land to a person that she was very friendly with, who actually will record a legal deed for it, legal in the English courts. Charlestown would buy the land and record a legal deed for it in the courts. Unfortunately, some of it's the same land. Squaw Sachem herself has moved over and is living on the hill right by the country club. There was no country club, but I'm trying to get a picture for you as to where she was. And she reserved land for herself that ran from just this side of the country club, if you are familiar with Winchester at all, and there's Gardner Place over there, and there's a very old farmhouse on it that belonged to one of the original families. It started there and it ran all the way down Cambridge Street into Arlington, where Cambridge Street becomes Mystic Street, all the way down to, if you know where the Senior Citizens Fire Station, Police Station is in Arlington, beyond that to a brook that's down there, Millbrook. And then it ran from the Mystic Lakes up the hill to the top of the ridge line, which would be beyond the country club and into Arlington. She reserved that for herself and her family and the remaining Indians in this area. We have lots of records of the whites who moved into this area having contact with Squaw Sachem and the remnants of this tribe until 1650. She dies. Okay. Her three sons, who were infants when their father was killed, they are, two of them at least are in the area after the death of Squaw Sachem. The Puritans have taken the remnants of the tribe and they have settled many of them in Natick, in what are called the praying villages. I don't know whether you've ever heard this, but they took many of the Native Americans and in order to convert them and uplift them, they put them in these praying villages in the Natick area that were model Puritan communities. And it is at that time, by the way, that their language is written down and the Bible is translated into it. And the tribe is living in Natick. All right. They then get involved in a bit of a larger conflict. In 1676, 100 years before our revolution, an Indian leader by the name of Metacomet, who the white man knows as King Philip, led a rebellion. And the Puritan and Pilgrim forces once again joined forces to suppress it, which is primarily down in Rhode Island, but the fighting was generally all over the place. One of Squaw Sachem's sons participates in that war on the side of the people. And the Indians that are living in the praying villages, some of them make the decision to side with King Philip. Some make the decision to side with the Puritan forces, and some make the decision to try and stay out of the whole thing. Unfortunately, they were treated as though they were the enemy. They were picked up from their villages and they were moved to the islands of Boston Harbor, which proved to be not good. And there was a fair amount of persecution of these Indians at that time. Only about 300 Indians from this tribe, the Massachusetts tribe, survives 1676, the King Philip's War. And in this area here, there basically are no survivors after 1800 in Winchester, okay? So, that's the story up to that point. I'm not going to deal with the Sachem. That's the story behind the Indians that lived here and the woman who was the leader at the time, white man. You entertain questions?
Did you say that the plagues, you just said, were they caused by the white man?
Well, the cause is by their presence. I mean, this is not, you know, they're not sending infected blankets or anything. This is not genocide. This is an accident of the situation. Theoretically, it might have gone the other way. What if the American was the carrier?
But they didn't have plagues before the entry of Europeans?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
I just wondered.
Is it true before the King Philip's War that the negotiations and the level of how they saw each other in government affairs was pretty well equal between the Indians and the white people at that time?
Well, it seems as though here anyway, and again, with the court documents and the deeds, it appears as though that's true. There's a measure of at least legal equality. Squaw Sachem is, the court case, by the way, is kind of interesting because she has given a certain portion of land to this individual who she has been friendly with, and will reaffirm it for his son. The Charlestown group has bought most of the land in this area from her, and it overlaps. And so when they go to court, it doesn't involve her other than she appears in the two deeds. But certainly in the two deeds, it appears that she's treated as an equal. And in the writings of some of the participants, it appears as though there's a measure of respect. If she were a white woman, she wouldn't have appeared in those deeds.
Yeah, right.
It's in the 1600s. She wouldn't have been seen in the land. And yet here she is. And they have negotiated with her. And the family that she gave the deeds, gave deeded land to as a gift now, come back to her, and she reaffirms those deeds. And so again, she's in the courts anyway, she appears to have a measure of equality. And there is no hostility, certainly not until after the King Philip's War in this immediate area. Right? They didn't come in here, got displays and anything like that. Yeah.
So is there any similarity between the image that's on the building or on the shirts and stuff to native tribes that were in this region?
Well, you know, I'll leave Dave to that task, but to me, when I look at the image on the building, I think it probably looks more like a Plains Indian than what the way a Native American of the Eastern Woodland would have looked.
Sorry, can't tell you.
Thank you.